Chapter 2, 1994 to 1996. Frankita and I held workshops in Switzerland, Austria, Turkey, and Germany. And in the midst of that, on September 15th, 1994, I received my copy of the German translation of A Course in Miracles. Later that same year, I received an exorcism. Let me explain. When I received my copy of the German course, Ein Kurs in Wundern, it took me about a week to read through the text. I basically spent day and night reading the 672 pages. The material is not designed to be read so fast, but rather to be digested slowly while applying its principles into one's life. It was as if I had eaten a rich chocolate cake, not a piece a day, but the whole cake at once. I got sick, coughed for 4 weeks, and felt weak and feverish, but boy, what an epic document I held in my hands. I underlined everything in multiple colors. I read and read and read. I brought the book with me everywhere. There was a cafe I went to frequently called Cult. It was smoky and packed, and I would sit in a corner with coffee, a stack of colored pencils, and the course. I didn't have a girlfriend and spent a good amount of time by myself, so I read. I made my own personal concordance to have easy access to passages that especially spoke to me. Sometimes while reading, I felt Jesus standing next to me, speaking to me directly. It was deeply comforting during those moments, but it also induced a previously unknown fear within me. Quote, I have made it perfectly clear that I am like you and you are like me, but our fundamental equality can be demonstrated only through joint decision. A Course in Miracles, text 6151. Quote, if you want to be like me, I will help you knowing that we are alike. If you want to be different, I will wait until you change your mind. I can teach you, but only you can choose to listen to my teaching. A Course in Miracles, text 846, 3-5. I was constantly on the lookout for items that had to do with Jesus. I got another painting and collected several figurines. This was simply the external expression of the internal relationship I was working on. I saw a flyer for a workshop on God and business and how to basically have God run your business. I found the topic interesting and signed up. It was organized by a church of which I later found out was an evangelical church that states that you can only get to God through Jesus, literally. And if you're not doing exactly that, you're basically damned to hell. I didn't know this at the time, and so I went to the workshop. It was a Friday evening lecture and a Saturday class. Except for a few items that I found odd, the topic was interesting. The seminar leader invited the class to a Sunday morning service and get together at the church for a group talk. In spite of some contradictions with my own belief, I felt excited to continue the conversation. So I took my relatively new copy of A Course in Miracles, freshly organized with colored post-it notes by themes, etc., and went. I was part of a small circle of 8 people, all warm, friendly, and engaging. At one point, someone asked me what I was carrying. I'm sure they assumed it was a Bible. I proudly showed them my copy of Ein Kurs in Wundern and told them enthusiastically that it came from Jesus. It didn't go over well. The leader of my group spoke to the priest who told me to show him the book. He took it as if it was coated in poison, opened it briefly, and said that this was the devil's work, and he would have to perform an exorcism. At that point, pretty much all of the attention was on me. There were about 100 people, all well-meaning Christians, ready to do God's work and get the devil out of this young man who was visibly confused about where his priorities lie, and who obviously needed saving. I sat on a chair. The priest and workshop leader stood in front of me, spraying holy water into my face while reciting Bible verses. Then he moved the cross side to side in front of me and at one point pressed it onto my forehead. Part of me found this very amusing. Another, deeper part, that was brought up Catholic, was terrified. All eyes were on me, as if waiting for the devil to jump out and escape from my chest. To me, nothing visible actually happened, but the priest was eventually satisfied and let me get up from the chair. Before I was released into freedom, the group told me that I should burn the book, never go back to it, and atone for my sins, otherwise I would become a tool for the devil. I held the course even tighter on my way home from the church. Still, I didn't dismiss what happened. That night, I lay in bed, seriously questioning everything. My very slowly budding relationship with Jesus, God, the course, everything. Was I wrong? Had I been misled? Was the course a scam and actually the work of the devil? I asked for help, being fully aware that if the people in the church were right, I was asking the devil, still active within me, for help. The next day I woke up with calm clarity. The Jesus of A Course in Miracles, my Jesus, was very different from the Jesus of the church and the Bible. The experience I'd had at the church, if nothing else, deepened my understanding of A Course in Miracles and Jesus' teaching. Yet I can see how the Course is seen as the work of the devil. It makes total sense, as the Course states very clearly that there is no sin. There are only mistakes, and as such, they are easily correctable, whereas sin is, quote, writ in heaven, permanently, and only through the death of Jesus and some serious atonement are we absolved from it. Quote, there's no stone in all the ego's embattled citadel that is more heavily defended than the idea that sin is real. A Course in Miracles, text 19.2.7.1. The Course talks about the Son of God as not being Jesus, one person, but all of us. It talks about the sonship, the sum of all God's children as a whole. Quote, the Son of God can be mistaken. He can deceive himself. He can even turn the power of his mind against himself. But he cannot sin. There's nothing he can do that would really change his reality in any way, nor make him really guilty. A Course in Miracles, text 19.2.3.1-3. This is a big topic, especially for those of us with a Christian background. I remember that during this period when I, for the first time, allowed myself to consider the possibility that sin and its consequence, guilt, were made-up concepts. Not only were they made up, but they were also made up with a clear purpose, to protect our individual existence and to keep love away from us. It sounds like an oxymoron, especially as we exclaim so intently that love is the one thing we are all looking for. In truth, real love, all-encompassing love, is the very last thing we allow ourselves to accept. It is simply too frightening. Otherwise, we would experience it because it is there, just like peace, constant, unwavering, eternal. Love, like peace, cannot take sides. It cannot leave us only to return. It is always there, fully accessible, there to embrace us completely. We are the ones pushing it away. Once a month or so, Frankita and I taught a workshop on the course in different cities in Germany, as well as Switzerland. It wasn't an easy time as my internal pain didn't dissolve. Only on very rare occasions did I feel an inkling of Jesus' presence within me. But as I was on this journey now, with no way of turning back and shutting him out completely, I knew I had to go through it. My ego mind was in utter terror during that period. I realized for the first time that I wasn't able to do this without Jesus anymore, but at the same time I wasn't able to do it with him either. I have mentioned the ego mind a few times and owe you an expansion of this idea, as this is an intricate part of A Course in Miracles, with Jesus playing a major role in its undoing. In the Course's thought system, we have a choice between our ego mind, also called the wrong mind, the sum of all of our beliefs in guilt, self-hatred, sickness, anger, specialness, individuality, and selfishness, and our right mind, symbolized by Jesus, the home of forgiveness, and the memory of God and love within us. We are constantly making a choice between those two diametrically opposed thought systems, most of the time without being aware of it. The real crux of the Course is its detailed description of the ego thought system an in-depth look at our darkest aspects as juxtaposed to the right mind. Let me give you an example that will show you how most of the text and a good amount of the workbook is set up. In lesson 121, forgiveness is the key to happiness. Besides a short intro into the lesson, the first 4 paragraphs are not about forgiveness, but describe the state of the unforgiving mind, our mind. As it always does, the course first describes the ego and then provides the right-minded correction for it. Quote, "The unforgiving mind is torn with doubt, confused about itself and all it sees, afraid and angry, weak and blustering, afraid to go ahead, afraid to stay, afraid to waken or to go to sleep, afraid of every sound, yet more afraid of stillness, terrified of darkness, yet more terrified at the approach of light. What can the unforgiving mind perceive but its damnation? What can it behold except the proof that all its sins are real?" A Course in Miracles, Workbook 121, 3, 1 through 3. After the description of the ego thought system follows its correction, found in the next lesson, lesson 122, Forgiveness offers everything I want. Quote, "What could you want forgiveness cannot give? Do you want peace? Forgiveness offers it. Do you want happiness, a quiet mind, a certainty of purpose, and a sense of worth and beauty that transcends the world? Do you want care and safety, and the warmth of sure protection always? Do you want a quietness that cannot be disturbed, a gentleness that never can be hurt, a deep abiding comfort and a rest so perfect it can never be upset?" A Course in Miracles, Workbook 122, 1 through 6. The Course lays bare our ego thought system and asks us to look at it with our inner teacher. If we look at the darkness with the light next to us, the darkness disappears. This, for me, slowly became a crucial aspect of my relationship with Jesus. He tells us in the Course that He is the light, the lamp, that illuminates the darkness within us, and in looking at the darkness of our ego thoughts with Him, we dispel them. This is hard. Not because it has to be, it's hard because we hold on to our guilt for dear life. This guilt we rarely see within ourselves, other than a vague sense of shame about things we've done or failed to do. But we do see the guilt all around us. If we're very honest, we realize that we are making everything and everyone responsible for how we feel. We don't see people for who and what they truly are, but only see our own projections on them. Those projections are like a veil drawn across the world. It is a veil of ugliness, separation, and unforgiveness. It is a veil that is literally made of guilt. Once in a while, that veil lifts, though, and we see the world as it truly is. One day, while sitting at my desk at work, I looked around and it suddenly seemed as if the items on my desk were speaking to me. Not in any kind of language. Rather, I felt a deep and vast love radiating from them towards me. Yes, love radiating from inanimate objects. The brief moment left me stunned. I had no clue what had happened, but later remembered lesson 28 in the Course that says, "Above all else, I want to see things differently." The lesson talks about the notion that when we look at something, we only see its past. We never see an item, a cup, a table, a chair, a pen, or a person in the present and how it really is, but always with our past experiences projected onto it. The lesson states that a table, for example, quote, "has something to show you, something beautiful and clean and of infinite value, full of happiness and hope. Hidden under all your ideas about it is its real purpose, the purpose it shares with all the universe." A Course in Miracles, Workbook 28, 5, 2, and 3. We don't see the real world, a term used in the Course to describe the world and everyone in it, once we have withdrawn the veil of unforgiveness we had projected onto it. Again, that veil is made up of our own belief in guilt. Yet it is in our power to withdraw this veil and reveal something that is literally indescribably beautiful and that sets us free. Quote, "Can you imagine how beautiful those you forgive will look to you? In no fantasy have you ever seen anything so lovely. Nothing you see here, sleeping or waking, comes near to such loveliness. And nothing will you value like unto this, nor hold so dear. Nothing that you remember that made your heart sing with joy has ever brought you even a little part of the happiness this sight will bring you." A Course in Miracles, text 17:2, 1 through 5. A similar thing happened one night in Frankita's apartment. We were preparing for a workshop. I sat on her couch and she sat in her chair at her desk. When, as if right in front of me, a crack in the space before me appeared, like a curtain had been drawn back, I suddenly looked into a different world altogether. I couldn't describe what was behind it. It wasn't anything physical or visual. All I know is that an intense wave of love reached me from this gap. It washed over me and just as quickly was gone. And not gone, because now I knew of its presence. I told Frankita about it and we spoke for a long time afterward, even though the experience itself was indescribable. Another example comes to mind. One day I went to get lunch and saw someone I had known during my teenage years. His name was Paulie, and I had always considered him odd. Too young then to find a bridge between us, he was one of the kids we often made fun of or simply didn't take seriously. When I saw him entering a store, though, I suddenly felt a wave of brotherly love wash over me. He was so dear to me at this moment, I cried. It was as if the veil of ugliness I had placed upon him was lifted, and what was behind it, hidden away for most of the time, was revealed. In the summer of 1995, I decided that I wanted to spend time at the Foundation for A Course in Miracles, back then located in Roscoe, New York. The foundation had offered various workshops and seminars, and among those was the option to stay there for an extended study period. At that time, I still lived in Germany and worked in a small publishing house as a go-to guy for everything including painting the offices, filing papers, running errands, and such. I wasn't very ambitious when it came to careers, even though secretly I dreamed of becoming a best-selling author. My plan was to save up all the money I made with the workshops and see how long I could stay. I saved every penny and one day registered at the foundation and booked a flight from Frankfurt, Germany to JFK, New York, to stay at the foundation for 3 months. I didn't really think about the length, but felt it was necessary to spend a prolonged period of time there. I'd saved about 5,000 Deutschmarks. That included what would cover the flight and would have to be enough for living expenses at the foundation. I felt as if I was embarking on a deeply significant journey, and while waiting for it, I filled many pages of my notebooks with my thoughts. At that time, rather than writing about what I thought as journal entries, I had begun writing to Jesus directly, as if communicating to him through letters. Each entry began with, "Dear Jesus," or "Jesus." I knew that this time at the foundation was not only to study A Course in Miracles, but to also deepen my relationship with him. Here's a small excerpt translated from German. This was 4 days before the flight. Jesus. I feel as if I have withdrawn deep into fear again. I'm watching a lot of TV and don't find any time for you, other than just before falling asleep. I wish for our relationship to deepen again, or at least that I can see it differently. There are so many distractions and I realize how little my willingness really is. But you promised that that would be enough. Thank you. P.S. I'm still scared of the flight, but if I see the airplane as my sister, the fear dissipates. What follows is a quote from the Course I had included in my notebook right after my entry. Quote, "As you perceive the harmlessness in them, they will accept your holy will as theirs, and what was seen as fearful now becomes a source of innocence and holiness." A Course in Miracles, Workbook 190, 5, 7, and 8. Before diving into this chapter any further, I want to mention one more occurrence, and that is Jesus' sense of humor. I always found it interesting that in traditional teachings he never smiles or laughs. Let me tell you of a couple of instances that beg to differ. I'm not comfortable flying. The fear isn't debilitating, but I'm much happier when we're back safely on the ground. During the time when waiting for liftoff, I would close my eyes and just be aware of my fear. A couple of times I would get an image. It was so funny, I almost laughed out loud. I saw Jesus in the cockpit. He was the pilot, but he wasn't doing what a normal pilot would do before the flight, like go through pre-check, etc. No. In this image, he was playing poker with the crew. Cigar in mouth, whiskey glass in hand, he was laughing and joking while playing cards. It was so preposterous that I couldn't hold on to my fear for long. Another time, while we were in the air and the ride got bumpy, I saw him again piloting the aircraft with his bare feet. At other times, he would do scary things like pushing the power lever all the way forward and making the plane dive down, an expression of mock terror on his face. Yet another time, he was doing yoga, once in a while looking at the instruments carelessly while humming Om. In some of those instances, he would wear his traditional outfit of robe and sandals. At others, he wore a more contemporary outfit like a Hawaiian shirt and Ray-Ban sunglasses. Those images usually took all the seriousness out of my fear of flying. The fear never completely dissipated, but the images made the whole experience so much more bearable. There's a deeper meaning to this that goes beyond him helping with my discomfort of flying. The smiling Jesus is not something we're accustomed to. We see him as a suffering man, a serious man. What if Jesus on the cross was smiling? Not outwardly, but in the sense that none of this thing we perceive as life was serious. What if he didn't die for our sins? What if the crucifixion was a teaching device and his real message was to show us that even the most outrageous act of violence against him had no bearings on his love for us? Using this model for our lives would mean that while we usually have to deal with much less than being crucified, we could learn that just like him, we cannot be persecuted, that the love behind the veil of the attack does not change at all. The Course speaks about this in a symbolic way, comparing the small wings of a sparrow with the wings of the eagle. Do we want to fly with the sparrow's wings, close to the ground, or do we want to soar among the heavens? It is impossible for our brains to grasp this concept. We can only accept this with the part of us that begins to see that we are more than who we think we are. For me, Jesus, above all, very gently and despite our many objections, shows us the way to the flight of the eagle.